Women Who Own It podcast spotlights women business owners who are pioneers in their field, setting trends, blazing trails, and creating game-changing innovations. Brought to you by WBENC, the largest certifier of women-owned businesses in the U.S. and a leading advocate for women business owners and entrepreneurs. And me, Allison Maslin. I've been a business owner for the last 35 years. I'm the Wall Street Journal best-selling author of the book Scale or Fail. So join our bold community of women who built it, grew it, and own it. I'll see you on the show. Welcome to Women Who Own It podcast. I am your host, Allison Maslin. I am the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Global Network, where we mentor business owners around the world to grow and scale their business. And Women Who Own It is brought to you by WBENC, Women Business Enterprise National Council. They are the largest certifier of women-owned businesses in the country. So this show is about business leaders, brought to you by women business leaders. So today, talking about a woman who owns it, I am so excited for you to learn from Jordan Salcito. She is the founder of Ramona Wines, which is one of my favorite topics is wines. This is so fun for me. So she's the founder of Ramona Wines and a wine veteran with over a decade spent in the industry. She is a master sommelier candidate, a wine enthusiast, and a 2018 and 2019 James Baird Foundation semifinalist for Outstanding Wine, Spirits, or Beer Professional. She is here to share with all of us wine-related things, business growth, scaling, and all the above, and especially from being a women-owned business, which I love. So Jordan, welcome to Women Who Own It.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm very honored to be part of the show.
Yeah. So in doing my research and learning about you, there's just so many things that I loved and that I learned. And I read that you said you can never know everything about wine. It's just not possible. So start with this. Good wine is wine you like. I was like, oh, that's really good. That kind of takes the pressure off. So how did you get on this path in the wine and the restaurant business?
Yes, initially it was because I had always loved restaurants and food. I always had sort of after my real job, I always had a waitressing job or a hostessing job, and I always enjoyed it. It was social, but it was also extra spending money and all of that. And then after college, where I majored in English literature and with a minor in philosophy, I moved to New York City without a real clear plan. I didn't realize that it's helpful to either have a plan or like a decent sized bank account when moving to New York as a immediate postgrad, and quickly realized I needed some extra cash while I looked for my real job that I was hoping would be in publishing, and ended up in restaurants, and one restaurant led to another, and that other one was called WD50. So it now has been closed for a few years, but it was by a chef named Wiley Dufresne, who opened the restaurant, and this was back in 2003, which of course dates me. But Wiley was brilliant, and this restaurant WD50 was the first of its kind in the U.S. Wiley was this. He continues to be this way today, but he's always experimenting and tinkering, and he had this incredible degree. He had a liberal arts degree, which is what I had as well, so that was so interesting to me. But it was the first restaurant I worked at that felt like a viable career path, where here were these super intelligent, interesting, reflective people who had created a really healthy work environment. And that is very rare, or especially was back then in the restaurant industry. And the more that I learned and stayed there, the more I realized, okay, I love the writing piece, which is what I knew I liked to do. And I felt like, okay, what if I write about restaurants? And so that's sort of how I got into it. And then along the way, actually, while I was then working at a different restaurant after culinary school called Danielle, which was a French restaurant on the Upper East Side here in Manhattan, the restaurant, or the chef, Danielle Boulou, noticed that I loved wine and would study it and sort of had books for after my shift. And he said, you clearly love wine, and you need to explore that. And he was lucky to be there because he's one of the few chefs that truly loves wine in the way that a sommelier does. And so I worked an event with him called the La Palais de Neige, which involved and was sort of a celebration of Burgundian wine, and ended up working my first harvest in 2006. And that for me was the moment that changed everything.
Wow. Isn't it wild how, I mean, you say you need a plan, but it sounds like there was a bit of a plan destined for you. So, I love how life works that way.
Yes.
And so, and I saw a video of you analyzing, you were doing a wine tasting and you were analyzing this wine, and you literally, I think you talked for 10 minutes about the structure and the taste and the visibility of the wine. I mean, I was so impressed. Of course, I was dying to have a glass of it. But there are very few female sommeliers in the States. Isn't that right?
And there are very few who sort of go through the ranks of the master sommelier court and end up testing for the final exams. And I think the good news is there are more, and well, there were pre-COVID. I think it will be interesting to see what happens in our new post-COVID world. But I think it is true that there are very few female sommeliers who go through the exam process through whether it's the court or the Master of Wine program. And I think, yeah, it's for a lot of reasons that we all can guess.
Right. Well, but how has, having that type of education, how has that accomplishment, because it's a big accomplishment, how has that impacted your life?
Yes, I would say, all right, so a couple of things. I would say for me, it was very important to go through the process and have that journey because as I was going through this journey, I should note that I'm married to a person, a man who's a brilliant wine professional, and he thinks the Court of Master Sommeliers, which at this point has actually they're going through their own PR crisis, as they should be, for sexual assault and harassment and a number of other things. But he has always disagreed with that, and I felt like, for me, part of what I always wanted to do was make sure that I could defend my own opinion about anything, and that I had done the work to have that opinion in the first place, because it's very easy to have opinions in any industry, but certainly in the wine industry. And what I sort of noticed before I went through the path of education, and I think education doesn't have to happen in an organized framework, but for me, I found it useful, and I also really liked the network that I was becoming part of, and the other sommeliers I was meeting. And I think it's so easy to have an opinion and to say it really loudly, and that resonates. And what I wanted to be able to do was, have my opinion be rooted in knowledge, and also, I think, therefore, not sort of borrow the opinion of this person that at the time I was dating, and how we've been married for 13 years. But I didn't want to ever be regarded as like somebody's girlfriend or somebody's wife, and I see, I guess I grew up in a family. My father, I have two younger sisters, so my father, my mother, and then my two sisters and I. And my dad was always the only man in our family, and he was raised exclusively by his own mother because his father died when he was very young. And the other person that was closest to him in his life was his twin sister. And so I think he grew up with this understanding that it was he always prioritized education, so that was something that I grew up believing was valuable, but also that it would be that it was important to have your own opinion and to do the work to understand why.
Right. And which led you into, I mean, here now you have a wine business, Ramona Wines.
Yes.
And so obviously having that behind you, I'm sure helps with the relationships and so forth. What were some of the defining moments for you, Jordan, when you first started Ramona Wines?
Oh my goodness. All right. Well, first we launched the actual test batch in 2016. And that was and of course, everything always takes a little bit longer than you think because the canning machine's not ready and this and that. But it was risky to launch in a can. And I would be lying if I said I thought cans were the future. So that's why, it was really the practical decision. And then at the end of the day, it was also the environmentally responsible decision based on the options that I had. And so that's why I went that route. But it was scary because a lot of people, it was long before this can explosion craze. And so it was a risk. And then I remember like that same year, Food and Wine came out and they had interviewed Whole Foods and said, and one of the main trends of 2016, they predicted would be wine in cans. And so it was really great timing in the end. But I would say the pivotal moment, maybe the most pivotal moment, was when I learned I was pregnant, because that was actually the moment that I decided, all right, this idea has been in my head for a while, and now is the time to act on it. Because for me, at that moment, pregnancy had been something I was very scared of. And because I worked in restaurants, I worked on the floor of restaurants, and my bosses at the time were two single childless male bosses who had no ability to understand what it might be like for them to have a female wine director overseeing their beverage programs. I think that was probably a scary thing for them, as I think it probably continues to be for a lot of men who don't have their own children that are also the owners of restaurant groups. And I based on a few conversations, it was clear to me that this was a perfect moment to go for it, to really give this a shot. Because at that point, I would say, like, the idea for Ramona, and I didn't know what it would be called at the time, but had been in my head for over 2 years at that point. But I always would deprioritize it to study for an exam, or we were opening a new restaurant, or whatever it was. And so this was sort of this moment from the universe saying, change is happening, and how are you going to respond to it? And it just felt like, this might as well be the time to give this a go.
Yeah. And I mean, but this was seriously like a whole other category, right?
Yes.
So what
Yes.
was it about? Because it's the rosé in a can, and your branding is beautiful also. And you said it's wine without rules.
Yes. Well,
I love that.
Thank you. So I would say there are sort of two categories, and now we have 5 flavors. But and one of them is a rosé, as you've mentioned. And then we also have the other, so like the other piece of the inspiration was, so much of my experience at the moment of sort of deciding to open Ramona or create Ramona was, I just come from this moment of studying basically with every spare moment, or opening the restaurant and getting home at 3 a.m. For this fine wine program that I cared very passionately about. But everything was very fine wine focused. And most of the time, what I realized was I wanted to drink something that was lower in alcohol, and that was sort of easy and didn't take itself too seriously, but that did not require me to trade down on my value system, which I had spent the past few years developing. And for me, what I've learned is that organically farmed grapes tend to be the most delicious. They also are the most environmentally responsible, because we're not putting chemical herbicides, pesticides, fungicides back into the land. And then in turn, what's happening now is that's getting into the water table and back into our food supply. And so it's this sort of crazy cycle that I've now like studied a lot more about. But basically it was sort of like, why isn't there something that actually tastes good? Because let's be honest, that's important. Yes, if it's going to be in a can, it's not because I want it to be cheap. It's because I want it to be portable. I want people to be able to recycle this thing. I wanted something that was delicious and didn't take itself too seriously, and didn't require me to trade down my value system for casual moments, almost for like these beer moments. But I am not a beer drinker. And so that's sort of where the inspiration came from. It was like almost like a spritz, but wine based and environmentally farmed.
Yeah, it's so creative. And I have heard about that with the pesticides and the wines and things like that. So that's really great to know. And so as you've grown this company, Ramona, what have been some of the biggest challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur, and what have you done to help you move past some of those
Oh my
barriers?
goodness. All right. That's such a good question that could take us so much time. Let me think about the most
I'm
prominent
sure you've
examples.
just had a few. I mean,
No, of course,
every
of
day
course, of
it's a
course.
new challenge,
Of
but
course, no, and it's an amazing, like it's really, I think for us, what's been really cool is like I heard a Danny Meyer quote once. And he's like actually an old boss and he's brilliant and wonderful, but he said, people who don't like problems should never become business owners, because owning a business is about solving problems in a way that's like very rewarding. I would say for us, in the early days, it was more sort of logistical or mechanical. Like for me, I thought, okay, we have to launch this for summer. And then there are always going to be things that you can control and also things you cannot. For example, the canning line was not even ready in July. It wasn't even ready until we thought we would can in May, but it wasn't ready until late July, which means we didn't actually can until August, which means we didn't launch until September. So little things like that. But I would say and then there are the things again that you can't control, like the canning company, the Polish aluminum company that sold cans to our winery partner in Italy did not require, like they weren't sort of checking following their own checklist, and that resulted in a can lining issue when like certain cans from many batches ago of lemon, like during lemon's basically launch, yeah, the tabs didn't open and there was like a funky smell to some of the cans if they got exposed to heat. And so it was an opportunity. And I guess I think of it as two ways, because with any challenge, there's always an amazing opportunity that comes along with it. And so for us, that was an opportunity to really get closer with our winery partner. And the same thing is true in COVID. I mean, I'm just, and now I'm just blown away by our winery partner who is this family run winery partner. It's actually three daughters and also one son, and then a mother and father. And the father is the grandson of the gentleman who started the winery. But now, like I used to go over for every canning run, and that's been more difficult in COVID. But my best friend, just coincidentally, my best friend from high school, has lived in Italy for a number of years, and usually she runs this travel company, but nobody's traveling. And anyway, it's amazing that now that has resulted in my friendship with her become even closer, and now she'll pop over to the winery if we all have a problem that we can't quite figure out how to solve, and then we just get in a room together. And even if that room is on Zoom, it's still fine. But having her there, I think it reinforces. I think for me, COVID has been an amazing opportunity to look and see and sort of figure out what it is that matters. And for us, yeah, we were able to launch direct to consumer. Like the challenge in COVID for us was that a lot of larger distributors will prioritize brands that are part of a large portfolio, and
right.
we're a small independent. We're a small independent winery, and so we're never going to be prioritized by the big distributors of the world. And so what we found instead is that we are actually seeing our sales astronomically higher with our smaller distributors who love the product and care about it. And that was an opportunity to reflect and say, we don't want to be with anyone who pays their sales team to care about certain products. I mean, we don't want to be on the incentive list at this massive distributor with 30,000 things in its book, because we're always going to get
Right.
lost, and we're never going to be able to pay up in a way that a larger company can. So instead, let's go where we have a natural fit. Let's to quote like a random person who is in a VC world that I remember gave this early advice, like go with what's easy. And it always felt, for a while, I feel like we had a year where I thought, no, we should go this way because that's what the big companies do, and this is what investors will want to hear. Whereas in reality, the opposite has proved true. We followed our value system, and whenever we do that, that is where the magic happens.
Wow. I mean, there's so much that you said there. And it's, when we talk about scaling, that's what we do. And you want to build a team managed company and get yourself as the founder out of the way as much as possible. So here, because of COVID, now you have your friend who's in Italy. So
Yes.
even when we do get back to traveling, I'm sure you're going to want to go to Italy, but you don't have to every time, right?
Yes,
So
totally.
that's huge. And then also, all the lessons with the distributors, there's so much there, right? So
stick with your value system is like my one
yes.
takeaway. If there's only one, it's like, it's really been that at every turn.
Yeah. And then you take the path of least resistance too, because I
Yes.
think we try so hard to break through this wall.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be so hard. So speaking of teams, like what are some of your best lessons when it's come to building your team? I know that some of the biggest challenges business owners have is with their team.
Yes. Okay. And I'm so lucky to have such an amazing team right now. And we are a smaller team than we were, but everyone cares. And I think like that's the most important thing is like having a team who cares is so valuable. And then taking care of that team and doing everything you can to take care of that team is really important as well. I would say, like we try to do a ritual every week, and it's for our in-house team here in New York because now we're sort of all spread out. But we do a ritual weekly outing to a nearby cafe that is also an account that we want to support and that could lead to a larger relationship. But we go out for hot chocolate every Tuesday. And actually we generally go with my son because he really loves to come too. And my colleague Nicole, I think he has a crush on her. Actually, it's really sweet. He's just, it's a sort of a sweet thing that is like a sort of reset point in the week, or just something fun that's out of the norm to get to do and look forward to. I think there are those things. I think,
so that connection really does create a strong culture.
Yes.
And having those things that are a set time and that the team can count on. Yes. And I love how you are connecting with your son in the week. I had my daughter with me a lot when she was growing up in the early days. I was running business. She just kind of came along.
Hearing that. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That makes me happy. And that's like Henry's favorite thing. Henry is our 5-year-old and he just loves to be part of it. And he comes to the office, and in fact, he has his own office here that Nicole made for him. It's like has a sign that says Henry's office. And but the other thing, and this is like a new thing that we're in the middle of, we're all reading a book right now. It's called Think Like a Rocket Scientist. I wish we had met 3 weeks prior, and then we would be all reading Scale Not Fail, which will be for our next book club. But I hired actually a friend of mine, a former colleague who used to run, I worked with her at a restaurant called 11 Madison Park back in the day. And she then went on to run the events program at the Nomad Hotel Group. And she was just always the person. And she's like one of the people who did so much and never got credit from, the people who were running the show, but she was the secret sauce that kept everyone happy and that made it fun to go to work, even in this really, really high pressure environment. And I'm so proud of her and inspired by what she's doing now, which is she started her own company, and where she can help larger companies or other companies focus on company culture. So she and I got together and we set a little budget and basically came up with a care package for everyone on the team, both our team here in New York, but also our director of finance who's in Austin, Texas, and our one of my sort of right-hand marketing and executive person who's in California, and then our CMO who's in New Jersey right now, and everyone gets a book. Oh, and also our head of PR who feels like a team member, and she's in Delaware. She moved during COVID, but we're all reading How to Think Like a Rocket Scientist, and we all have a meeting in a couple of weeks to discuss. And then I also got everyone just a little care package and wrote people a note to say, look, it's a moment where I know everyone is working really hard, and I know that yeah, there's so much up in the air because so much is unknown. So much was unknown last year, and as we as we acclimate to the new normal, there's still so much uncertainty, and that's a good thing. Actually, that's a lot of what this book is about, is that we as humans like certainty, even though it's sort of a false pretense. So embracing uncertainty is a gift and a talent, and a muscle that often atrophies unless we focus on it.
Yeah, I do feel like COVID forced us to be innovative, like
Yes.
fast. And we were able to
Yes.
prove to ourselves, like, wow, we
Yes.
could do this,
Yes.
So, I love that. I love that. Think like a rocket scientist. I will have to check out that book. And I love that you take the time for your employees. Just those little things, the handwritten notes, and for people to feel like that they're important, that you care about them, that you appreciate them. It goes a long way, really goes a long way. So what do you know now that you wish you had known when you started in the business world?
Another great question. What do I wish I had known? I really do wish, I feel like this was a revelation from this book, just the reminder that there's no one right way to do anything. I think knowing that is very powerful, because there will always be people who come into your world who are experts in your field and who know more about the wine industry than I do, or how things are done. And when I think of the biggest mistake that I made in this company, it was really listening to that kind of messaging and making a few decisions from someone I thought like had more experience and knew better than I did. And it took us a year to get out of those bad decisions and get back on track in a way that is authentic to who we are. And so I think that was a really powerful lesson, that if I can spare anyone else from making that mistake, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, definitely. The hindsight is 2020, but
Yes.
I call it research and development.
It's so true. It's so true.
It's
And
how we
sometimes,
learn.
sometimes
It's
you
how
have
we
to
learn.
learn the hard way. Exactly.
So you are WBENC certified, and how has WBENC supported you and your business growth?
Yeah, I would say it's immediate legitimacy to so many organizations. And just immediately, once you realize you're part of this network, and this network is incredible and incredibly powerful and wants to be there to support women business owners. So in addition to, this podcast is a wonderful example, and we're meeting through WeBank, and I'm so happy to be speaking with you right now. And then the little things like that can also turn into very big important things, like being part of the gift guide. But really, I would say for us, what's so meaningful on a day-to-day level is just being part of this and being able to tell our distributors, and then they in turn know exactly. It legitimizes who we are, and it's a way to back up. We're not just sort of a female face by a man-owned or male-owned and male-run company. We're not that. And so I think I'm glad to see through WeBank the amount of incredible companies that are part of this and that want to support this, and that we then have access to a direct conversation with as a result of being part of this network.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And it's just such wonderful people and super,
Yes.
super supportive.
Yes.
So as we kind of wrap this up today, this is just so awesome. I'm excited to be connected with you. What is your number one piece of advice that you can think of, and all that you've been through, that you would share with the business owners that are listening?
Okay, I would say the number one piece of advice for me is that I think would be the most valuable is really, you don't have to veer from your value system. And the book Start With Why is one that I read recently again. And if you can take the time to read it instead of course, the YouTube or the TED Talk is great, but it just reaffirms everything that if you have a company that you started because you have a belief system, there are other people that share that belief system. And so don't don't diverge from it, and don't, even though it can be so tempting, and there are so many moments where it's a hard call, but at least in my experience, the value system is the North Pole. And if you can just remember that, you end up in the right place.
Yeah, that's so true. It really is. I mean, if you hire based on that,
Yes,
your
exactly.
marketing message, and you're really coming from your heart, and I also think your customers just feel that.
Yes.
They feel that. So that's really, really powerful. And I also read in an interview that you said they said that they asked you a question, what you would like to have disappear from the drink list forever. And you said beer. So I had to laugh because I love wine and I can't I've tried to like beer. Like I
Totally.
have tried, and it just doesn't align. So
There with you. I'm there with you. And you know what? We don't all like split pea soup. We don't all like
true.
cilantro. There are so many
Yeah.
things that
Kale.
yes, exactly. My husband's idea of a perfect lunch couldn't be more different from my idea of a perfect lunch, and neither of us are right or wrong. And so I think that's one thing that I think, America sort of imposed on the rest of the wine world, that's unfortunate, but luckily it's breaking apart, is the sort of Robert Parker idea that this wine equates to this score on this 100-point scale that is arbitrary and relates to his palate. So it's very useful if your palate is exactly the same as Robert Parker's, but remember that we all have different palates. And so this notion that some wines are 99 points and some wines are 100, and it's a fun thing if you're a collector and you want to play that game, but it's worth remembering that that is a game, and that you are then trading a commodity. You're not it has nothing to do with whether or not you should or should not like that wine.
Yeah, you know what? That's so true. I hadn't even thought of it that way. So thank you for that. And so
My
what's
pleasure.
ahead for you, Jordan, and Ramona Wines? Do you have any new exciting projects on the
Oh my
horizon?
goodness. Okay, so a couple things. We are planning to launch a new flavor over the summer, and that actually takes us back to sort of the inspiration. It's going to be called Amarino, and it means a little bit bitter in Italy, and it's almost like an organic version of an Aperol spritz. So I'm very excited about that. And then we're also going to launch our wine club, which will be called the Spritz Society, hoping for Memorial Day. So we're working out all the logistics on the back end.
I love that. I love that. Plus, that is your scale. That's your recurring.
Yes,
revenue.
yes.
Yay.
Okay, good. I cannot wait to read your book.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, this has been so fun. Really been a delight to interview you today. And so thank you very much for being on Women Who Own It. And if you are listening to Women Who Own It for the first time, please share this with other women business owners and subscribe to the show. If you've enjoyed this today, please write a review. And until next time, get out there and elevate yourself, because you are worth it. Bye, everybody.